What is the most interesting or extreme career change you have experienced? After 14 years of managing a Chuck E. Cheese, I made the switch to pest control. I like to say that I went from working for the mouse to working against the mouse. You could make the argument that both jobs were pest control. My uncle, high school dropout, Air Force, police officer, made detective, businessman, got an MBA, a doctor. The head teacher at my secondary school used to be a professional boxer before becoming a head teacher. Now he's been arrested for fraud. I went to school with a guy who was very proper. He didn't drink or smoke and was always toward the top of his class. He was about 2 weeks away from getting a degree in chemical engineering when he dropped out to grow pot. All he had to do was take the finals, which he probably would have passed without studying. But he packed up all his stuff and moved out to become a weed farmer. Interestingly, he still doesn't smoke, but he must be pretty good at growing, because last I saw him, he was driving a $500,000 car. Smart enough to recognize an opportunity and ride it all the way to the bank. I have a classmate in HS who was a drummer in a band, then switched to doing ministry work as a music coordinator. Then he made a sudden and successful career change as a wedding photographer. Drummer to music coordinator didn't seem like too much of a stretch. Successful photographer is a featuring in its own right. A buddy of mine from 8 married a Delta Force guy. Big, scary, muscular. I will murder everyone in the room looking Motherfucker. I hugged him at the wedding and it felt like I was hugging a tree trunk made of iron. 6'4", solid muscle, permanent scowl. We call him G.I. Joe when he's not close enough to hear murder us. He got out of the military after his 12th deployment and became a kindergarten teacher. The kids love him. He has their artwork all over their fridge, brags about his class's field trips when we all be about work, and he gets teary and emotional every year at their graduation into 1st grade. We ran into a birthday party full of his students at a movie theater and the kids were swinging around on him like a jungle gym. He turned into an absolute puddle of sweet, silly goo. It was delightful to watch. All I can imagine is kindergarten cop. Martial arts instructor, magician, EMT, alcoholic. Quite the ride. Know a guy that went from a back office accounting role to a portfolio manager at a leading hedge fund. $70K one year to $430K the next. Dude is absolutely brilliant though. Pat Tillman leaving behind a multi-million-dollar NFL contract to join the army as to be up there. Especially since he joined and became a ranger. My friends often comment about my career path. Graduated with 2 diplomas from college, computer networking and programming. Right after school landed a job doing entry-level tech support. After 6 months landed an awesome sales job with a large telco company. Benefits, pension, good commissions on top of good base pay. Worked that job for 2 years then the center closed. Off to the kitchen where I worked at a chicken wing place for close to 2 years until I found a roof truss job. I worked that for 6 months while I was looking for another job which happened to be working on a giant printing press as an operator. That job was 8, had benefits, good hours but it was a very intense and hot environment. While I was working at that workplace I ran for and was elected to my local union's exec board. I got to travel a bit and work on things like the 15 per hour PR campaign in Ontario so I was out of the workplace for a good deal of time. Got sick of the politics, started looking for other work and that's when I became a school custodian at a public elementary school and that's where I am at today. Working for the school board in my area is a good gig. Full pension, lots of sick days, decent pay, Friday hours. You don't have to take the work home with you. Get some hilarious stories. Working with kids. Now I am starting to get into music engineering. I hope one day I get to write a score for a video game. So yeah, I've been around the block. Holy mother of, you've had quite a journey. Hope whatever may be next is a continuation of the fun. My old bilingual history teacher stopped teaching and became a stand-up comedian. Guy I worked with. We worked at a legal advice agency in the UK, a non-profit for free advice and specialist casework to people who couldn't otherwise afford it. This guy was basically a machine. His knowledge of his given field was almost encyclopedic. He could have given some of the lawmakers a run for their money. I've been working here for almost 10 years now, but he'd been there since 2000. And when I called him a machine before, I meant it. While his colleagues would have similar caseloads and end up having to come in early and stay late to get all their work done, he came in on time, left on time and got all of his work done perfectly, without issue. He never stressed about having too much work and rarely complained about the job. A month ago he resigned so he could take a job as a postman. Said he wanted a job completely outside of advice work where he could just be left alone with his thoughts. Power to him, I guess. Whoa. My dad owned a masonry company with 3 kids. He then decided to go to med school in his late 30s, early 40s. He later had a 4th kid and gave the company to my mom to run while he finished and became a doctor. Still works today and he's the smartest, hardest working guy I know. Not all heroes wear capes. Still don't know why my mom let him go to med school with 3 kids. P.S. He majored in history. I worked for a guy who ran a concrete firm, then got tired of working outside in the heat and got himself some IT certifications. He was my manager for 4 years until we both got laid off. Then he decided on another career change and became a professional race driver. A guy I went to law school with used to be an opera singer. I'd pay him extra to sing my case in court. I had a friend whose dad was an electrical engineer, then decided to go get an MD and become a doctor when he was in his late 30s. Not sure if this counts, but I quit my job to play World of Warcraft full time. All kinds of extremeness ensued. I was once the general supervisor of patient relations and finance special projects for a large cardiology firm out of one of the nation's best hospitals. One day I decided I hated being in an office, so I quit my job on the spot and moved to a cheaper city and took a job at a porno theater. I took a serious pay cut, but it was honestly the best decision I ever made. This was nearly 10 years ago and I've never been happier. Work-related stress was probably the #1 problem in my life, and for me at least, no amount of money could make it worth going back. That is crazy bold. Awesome to hear that you are happy. I think we can get enamored with the idea of making it to the top without knowing the toll it takes or what else it will impact in our lives. Your story shares a great perspective. I have a good friend who went from being a full-time microbiologist to being a full-time yoga instructor. She used to teach just a few nights a week after her day job. Her entire life and demeanor have changed. She's noticeably more confident and carries so much more joy with her. She travels, teaches independently and in studios, leads workshops, and just organized her first festival. She's absolutely killing it. She admits it was a process for her. She worked for several years after planning to leave her job, saving and preparing to make the change. I admire her patience. Art student to Nazi dictator has gotta be up there. I went from being a stand-up comedian to an industrial engineer. Not that I ever actually made a significant amount of money as a comic. I'm sure you'd be a breath of fresh air amongst engineers. Of course, that's my own bias from the ones I know. Military to civilian job. I felt utterly lost by how free I felt switching over to the civilian job. My last year of the military I was generally working from 0500 to 2100 every day. After we got back from the shop, I was inspecting uniforms, making sure rooms were clean, checking in on those on 24 hours duty if they were under me, etc. I had a sergeant above me doing the same for everyone in my rank. I had an official order and regulation for everything in my life, down to the millimeter. Punishments could be swift and relentless for falling out of line. When I got a civilian job working as an unarmed security guard while I went to school, I barely had anything to take care of. It was me, my own workspace, and an hourly text check-in with my supervisor if I was working. There was about a paragraph on the dress code, and a tiny little book on how to be a security guard which basically said observe and call the police. When my shift ended, that was it. There was nothing further to do until next shift, and the guard I was working with was really rebellious against half the rules and was never reprimanded once for it. And people don't yell at each other like the military. I used to see in your face, veins popping, screaming almost once a day. Regular punishment for small mistakes. Since I got out 3 years ago, haven't seen it once. Whoa, what different worlds. Thanks for sharing your experience. Trying to fathom that transition you've described. A friend went from being a bellhop to a popular local radio personality with a fairly large fan base. My mom had a really nice oral surgeon back in the day, as in, she used to drive up to Orange County from San Diego just to see this guy. He was that good. Then, in the early 90s he decided he wanted to be a computer networking engineer, which, at the time, wasn't the well-paying job it became later on. He was just really passionate about it. He got his CNE, and Dr. Sturdivant and was no more. My wife worked for a firm on Wall Street following her undergrad, went back for pre-med and was working in a lab doing stem cell research on cancer and HIV, including publishing multiple studies. When I met her, she now works in business intelligence and software coding. Yeah, she's wicked smart. It's pretty annoying. Most women think they're always right. Your wife might actually be always right. Good luck to you, sir. Cousin was a cook assistant manager in a restaurant, then decided to go back to school part-time. Got himself a Spanish language degree and became an ESL teacher, then got a master's degree and became the dean of a local university. Now he's a tenured professor and working on his doctorate. I went from working in a butcher's to working in a funeral parlor. Make of that what you will. I went from managing a plastic surgeon's office for 4 years after college to working in concert production, and the first artist I worked with was Radiohead. Thanks Craigslist. My mom was a coal miner who became a lawyer and judge. My dad's guitar teacher used to work for NASA. He used to literally be a rocket scientist, but then he decided that it wasn't fulfilling, so he learned to play guitar and started playing gigs and teaching guitar. My friend went from being a cop to being a stoner tattoo artist. Being on reality TV to POTUS. Met Reagan. I know a guy who, shortly after getting his CPA designation, quit his job at an accounting firm to pursue a rap career. I attempted a computer science degree, then switched to nursing, went from avoiding people to being with them. Awesome. You could always look into nursing informatics if you don't want to be with people again. P-shop clerk in my college town to ESL teacher in South Korea. Dave Chappelle has had quite a ride. I had a science teacher in HS that was a year from being a brain surgeon. Met a girl, wanted a family with her, got his teaching degree in 3 months. He was an excellent teacher too. Nizi Arbib. He was a hardcore commando in the Israeli Defense Force. He and a couple of brothers then went into hairstyling and opened a shop in San Diego. Adam Sandler's movie You Don't Mess with the Zohan was based loosely on the guy. My dad switched careers at 58 years old. Generally an interesting work history, though. He graduated HS and went straight to the Air Force working on plane computers, 1961 to 1965. When he got out, he worked as a bartender. He met my mom and then he and a partner opened their own bar in their mid-20s. In his early 30s he moved and my mom cross-country, Long Island, NY to Arizona, and started another bar. When it burned down, he started his own used car dealership with a partner that embezzled a bunch of money and the business failed. This happened in his 40s. Then he worked as a used car sales manager for a large dealership until he was 58 and got a job working for a bank, HSBC. I guess technically he was still in the auto industry, because he basically drove around to different dealerships and tried to get them to use HSBC for financing. Then in the economic crash of 2008, HSBC shut down their auto finance division and he just retired. Now he plays tennis 3x a week with other old retired dudes and is loving life. My best friend went from being a counselor at a gay conversion camp into a stand-up comedian. Now instead of praising God and condemning sodomy, he spends his nights mocking white-bearded sky kings and extolling the virtues of butt stuff. Night and day. Sounds like he converted in his own way. I know a guy that was a heart surgeon then later in life became a successful actor, was in many hit movies and has his own TV show. I had a roommate that worked at a PDQ car wash and saw on public records 2 years later that she was arrested for keeping a place of prostitution. Not extremely drastic, I suppose, but bold nonetheless. Went from fast food to wrestling deer. A friend of mine went from successful opera singer, to yacht mechanic, to music teacher, to realtor. I think he's sort of settled at realtor now. but I can't imagine working that much of a spectrum. Frankie Muniz went from Malcolm in the Middle to Criminal's Minds to being a race car driver. And now he doesn't remember any of it. McDonald's, then to the US Army for 20 years, then to an IT company as a senior systems executive. I practiced law for 9 years before going to dental school. I recently graduated and am officially a dentist while still being a licensed attorney. If your practice isn't named Tooth and Law, I'm disappointed. You have been visited by the Doggo Beer Master. Comment delicious so you always have beer in your life. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.